All right. So now comes the interesting topic, and that is authorization. How do we do authorization? It's OAuth authorization. And here I already saw on the Spotify homepage some information about OAuth. Let me go back to where we've started. We have started on this web API guide, and there they have an authorization guide. It's very good that it's in the start. Okay, and here they describe OAuth basically, right? You have an end user, which is our Node.js application. We have, no, this is a end user. This is me sitting in front of the computer. My app, this is my Node.js application. This is the web API. Here's the login screen that we will need. This is the standard login screen we need to present to the user. And they have the authorization flow, authorization code flow, implicit flow, client credential flow. Okay, good. They have implemented standard OAuth. Then we need to register our application first. We need to get client ID and client secret. So let's do that. Let's click here. Register your app. On the dashboard, create a client ID. Yes, that's what we'll do. Let's create a client ID. Manage your Spotify integrations. Very good. Log in. Okay, there we go. Log in, create a client ID. It's exactly what I need. Create a client ID. Oh, okay, process. Here we have another form that we need to fill in. Create an app or hardware integration. App or hardware. Playlist. Playlist printer prints a playlist, prints all the tracks of a playlist. What am I building? Well, I'm building a desktop app right now. Next. Are you developing a commercial integration? No. Create non-commercial app. I understand that this is not for commercial use. Cannot migrate. I understand the terms. Yes, submit. And there I have it. I have my client ID. Let's just go and copy this. Let's just go and copy this. Client ID. So I copied the client ID and the client secret. Back to dashboard. There is my playlist printer. So now I jump back to the explanation of how to use OAuth on this website. Client ID, client secret, redirect URI. So what I actually need now is I need a URL for the authorization endpoint. Authorization guide. Authorization endpoint, I can already see that. Different scopes. Authorization code flow. Very good. We get an access token. Oh, simple. We just go to this website. And we put in a number of values, such as the client ID, response type, redirect URI. This is, I think, what's required. Right? So client ID, then we have the response type, which we set to code, and then we have the redirect URI. Client ID equals, we take the value from above, so a redirect URI. We did not specify a redirect URI. Why did we not do that? We need to specify the redirect URI. Okay, so because we're gonna do some really simple OAuth, I'm just gonna redirect this to apiuniversity.com, because we will do everything in the browser. We'll do ghetto style OAuth. Okay, let's add that redirect URI. Let's copy it. Done. Done over here. Back to the browser. Redirect URI. We need to URL encode it. All right, URL encoder. URL encoder. I want to encode this. There we go. This is our redirect URI. Very good. So we can actually already start calling this, because what we'll get back after the user logs in is an authorization code. With this authorization code, we can then call additional token APIs. So let's prepare the token API as well, because the token API is a little bit more difficult, and maybe we need to set the scopes so we can actually access playlists. Scopes, list of scopes, authorization scopes. playlist read private, read collaborative, users playlist read private. That sounds about right. So that's what we want to have as a scope parameter. Scope. Okay. Put that in our browser, in our window here. Scopes. Scope parameter. Let's just add it here. Scopes. Playlist read private. Very good. Now we're going to do the token endpoint and configure the token endpoint. Token endpoint is going to be a post to this address. And there we have a curl command which we'll use in order to get a token. So authorization basic. What do we need to do to get this parameter for authorization? We have client ID and client secret as here. Now we need to construct client ID colon client secret. Then we take the whole thing and just check that you don't have any spaces or so included, and we base 64 encode it. Base 64 encoder. Okay, so what did we do? We have now the authorization for the token endpoint, which is a basic authorization. Then we have grant type, authorization code, very good. Here we need to fill in the code that we get back from the authorization endpoint. And then we call this token endpoint. And as a result of that curl call, with the authorization code filled in, we should get an access token, right? So let's just do that. Let's take our ghetto style OAuth and execute it. Authorization endpoint. We of course need to open that in the browser. Okay, so what happens now is this is what the end user typically experiences when he wants to use our app. First needs to authenticate with Spotify. Spotify says, okay, dear user, here are a number of terms and conditions. Okay, yeah, this is very legally correct. I accept this as a user after, of course, reading all of this. Next screen comes up. Now, connect playlist printer to your Spotify account. Playlist printer, that's what we registered, comes from the client ID, and it wants to print all the tracks of a playlist. That's the text that we put in, and we're already logged in. I'm already logged in this browser. There's a cookie from Spotify, so that's okay, right? If I wouldn't be logged in already, I would need to log in at this place. I say this is okay. What happens next? What happens next is that we get a redirect to apiuniversity.com, because that's where we said we have the redirect URL. So up here you can see that this is our redirect URL, apiuniversity.com/, and then we have a parameter called code. And we kind of need to hurry a little bit to take that code, which is only valid for a short period of time, copy it over, and enter it into our call to the token endpoint. Now, we take the complete curl command and we go to a command line, enter the curl command, fire, invalid client. Okay, so we have to fix our client. Okay, so we base64 encode our client ID : client secret. Then we click on encode. And we get this long string. Well, let's go back here and enter this as the basic authorization. It's base64 string. Then we call the curl command. And boom, there we go. We got an access token. This is here. Not bad. So, only thing we actually need is the access token. That value from the access token. And we copy it into our node.js application. And now let's just run the node.js application. And we run the node.js application. First, we need to get the modules. So how do we get the modules? We use npm install request. There we go. It's installing lots of stuff. Very good. Now we can run node Spotify playlist JS. And we get an error. The href is not available. We go back to Spotify playlists. That's where we got started. Reading a playlist. Users playlist. Yeah, the user ID. Okay, I need to add my user ID, matt.beal. I need to add the user ID. That's of course it. Beal_ch. There we go. Now we have all the playlists. Very good. Now we can proceed doing the next step in our program. Now we can get the first playlist and get the content of that playlist. So we have my list. That's the one we just created. It's a playlist, my list. That part works already. Then we have a problem with the for each. Tracks for each is not a function. Do we not have an array on there? Playlist.tracks for each? Why does it not work? So we already got one step further. That one works. Playlists. Now we go on playlist. And the playlist somehow gives us momentarily an error because the tracks object doesn't work as I expected it. I see why. I was too quick. I read an array of playlist track objects inside a paging object. Okay, yeah, tricky. Now we need to look at the paging object first in order to understand how the tracks object works. Paging object. Playlist.items. Playlist.tracks.items. That one could work. Yes, and it did work. There we go. I got now a playlist called My List, and it has the content Don't Stop Believin'. So now we go to Spotify and we add another song. We add another song to our playlist. For example, where are we gonna go? We're gonna go to Happy Hits. Happy Hits. What do they have? Let It Be Me. Okay, let's add it to the playlist, to the My List. Okay, so now we have changed My List. If we repeat the API call, I expect that we have a new entry in our playlist. Okay, so we have Don't Stop Believin' and Happy Now. That's the one we just added. Okay, now we have a little bit of cleanup to do here, which is basically we should stop printing out all the playlists that this user has. And that's about it. That's the task we've set for ourselves. We've set the task to create a list of tracks in a playlist. And that's what we have achieved. So I would say from that perspective, the user experience on the Spotify API is quite good. They have very good getting started web pages. So I really like it. If you go Google Spotify API, the first thing you click, Spotify for Developers, tells you something about how the API works and what an API is, and explains you a little bit about REST, about URLs, about what do they have here? Response codes, about authorization. So you really get a very quick start. That's what it basically says. This is how web APIs work, and that's how we at Spotify work. Very good way of getting started. So then we have the quick start, and we were kind of lucky on the quick start. It tells you something about set up your account, register your account, how to write a Node.js application. We were lucky with the guides. The quick start, okay, the quick start is somehow in between the first landing page, then the quick start guide, a little bit more program oriented. How do I program stuff? And then the quick guides. The quick guides, that was the very good thing because it gave us right away information about working with playlists and the authorization guide. That's the two things that we actually needed. In the authorization guide, they have done a really good job explaining OAuth. All right. They even have these kind of sequence diagrams and so forth that are useful. And then they give you examples. They give you curl code calls. So very good stuff. Very good stuff. Then we went on from there to the playlists, working with playlists, there was a little bit of information that we didn't really read about private, public playlists and so forth. We jumped directly into reading a playlist, get a list of the user's playlists, and that's the documentation. That's the API documentation, very good. You can see on the right-hand side all the URLs and examples. And I personally work with the examples. I don't really like to read this specification here. The examples give me usually all the info I need. Except if they are so complicated as they are here. Then it's good to have a bit more of a structured approach. The only thing that was a bit strange on the API design was that container object that we had then later when we went on to get a playlist, get a specific playlist, and we wanted to read the tracks. That was a bit confusing, right? So we get tracks, and then we have array of playlist track objects. Okay, that would have been fine. That was my first hunch of how I should do it. But it's actually an array of playlist track objects inside a paging object. And now I have to understand the paging object as well. It wasn't really bad. And I mean, we haven't really implemented the paging yet because we have a very short playlist. But if you just have a quick look at it, it's a bit confusing, right? We figured it out in the end. It wasn't too bad. All right, so now let's recap. Let's do it one more time. Call our API. It gets a playlist called MyList, and it prints out all the tracks that are in this playlist. That's exactly what we set out to achieve. The API of Spotify has supported us. It didn't let us down. Worked pretty much how we expected, except for this little paging thing. Authorization worked. We did ghetto style OAuth authorization. We didn't implement the complete flow. We didn't implement our own redirect endpoint. But here you already can see that, well, without complete implementation, you can get your OAuth token and you can get started. So the one thing that I will do now is, because in this video we have all the OAuth tokens, we have all the client credentials and so forth, I will go in and I will delete all of these credentials. So you would need to get your own account, get your own client ID, client secret, and enter that. So if you just copy down any of the credentials that you see in this video, it won't work. So rest assured, everything's safe. The next show is going to be next Monday, again, 8 a.m. Pacific time, 17 Central Europe time. And we'll review another API. Looking forward to have you there. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Okay, see you in a week.